Very much like gadgets. My brother Rafi likes gadgets even more than me. He is the actual, right, but you have the drone. But we should have brought that, like, fly it around.
Maybe next week. Come back for next week.
What'd you say? Oh, he's also into drone. Right, very good. Right. Father-in-law is also, well, he does videos. He actually has a drone, yeah. No, you're right. Also true. These are all amazing calls. Okay, well, back to Parsha preview. Very exciting. Parshas Lech Lecha. Kidding. Parshas Chayei, Sara. So I made a couple copies of Marakomos, but don't get nervous because there's just no reason to get nervous. It's just to help follow through. There's a couple unbelievable Marakomos just kedai to see it inside. So that's why I had to print it. Thank you for coming, Justin. I printed 10 copies on my printer, but then I think it printed closer to 100. I'm not sure why. Anyway, I have no idea why.
Expecting a bigger crowd.
Yeah, no, yeah. Okay, and at the end, I'm just going to show you a little sneak peek. I got a graphic at the end to show you guys, but it's actually in color. I'll turn it around soon. Just we have to get to the point before we get there. Okay, so Parshas Chayei Sara. It's interesting. The Torah goes through not one, two. It goes through 20 psukim, right? Talking about the burial plot, the story of Sara Imenu. And it's a funny thing because the Torah, we know, doesn't waste a letter, a word, a pasuk. So to go through, I think it's 20 psukim about the death of Sara Imenu, not specifically about her death, but it's surrounding her death. It's Avram Avinu trying to, he goes to Ephron, he goes to the Bnei Ches, which is the whole idea in of itself, Bnei Ches, the people of Ches, people of 8. Are they related to the Chashmonaim? Who were these people? Mysterious. Uriah Achiti was from Bnei Ches, actually. The Sfas Emes points out that Bnei Ches it's like a reference to Klal Yisrael on some level, but conversation for another time. Either way, the Torah goes through the 20 psukim about her death, and we'll go back to that. We'll go through the story of Eliezer and finding a wife for Yitzchak, right? He says, Eved Avram Anoichi, and Bet Lavan story, Besuel, right? Very exciting, Shidduchim, back and forth, and the Torah also delineates many psukim about this plot, and Rashi points out that it speaks a lot, we care a lot about even the talk of the Avadim, because there's Yisaitistic lessons to come out of there. But I want to focus your attention. If you look at number 1, there's a couple of words that stick out, which I think creates a little bit of a theme. And that is when, after Avram, he mourns over his wife, but there's a small baze in the Torah because he doesn't just stay in a state of mourning. He rolls up his sleeves and does something. And the next word after that is what I have here in Pasuk Gimel. It's in 23 Gimel, and the Pasuk says, Vayakom Avram got up. It's not actually bolded in the Torah, but I bolded it here because you'll see in Pasuk Zayin, just 4 psukim later, it says it again, Vayakom Avram. So already it should start to perk your mind a little bit, like what's going on, these 2 vayakams. Then we have a contrasting word. The opposite of getting up is sitting down. So 3 psukim after that, in Pasuk 10, it says, the Ephron Yoshev, Ephron was sitting. Okay, we're already starting to see something, right? Avram stands up, Ephron sits down. Then the field itself, in Pasuk 17, Vayakam, Sidei Ephron, we see the word Vayakam once again. The field of Ephron had a tekuma, Rashi says. It had an elevation. Not only that, then we see it again. It says in Pasuk 20, 3 psukim later, Vayakam Hasadeh, that the field had an elevation. It's interesting, no? 4 times the Pasuk in these psukim, these 20 psukim, it says the word Vayakam, that Avram got up, the field got up. In contrast, Ephron was sitting. It begs the question, first of all, what's going on? What was standing up, sitting down, field? What does that mean? A field standing up? What actually is going on? So let's look at Rashi. If you look in Rashi, the first Rashi that's here on the page in Pasuk 17, Rashi says, "Tekuma haisalo." The field itself had an elevation. Sheyotze miyad hedyot liyad melech. It went from the hands of a hedyot, a regular person, which was Ephron, which ironically is funny because in the perspective of Bnei Ches, Ephron was like their leader. The Torah is calling him, or Rashi's calling him a hedjot, which is a lesson in its own right. What they think are leaders, we have a different perspective, perhaps, how to actually view these people. Liat HaMelech, it went to the hands of a Melech, which was Avram Avinu. Okay, so there's an interesting thing about the cave of Machpelah. It's called the double cave, Ma'aras HaMachpelah. And if you look at number 2, it says this is what Avram Avinu wanted. This is what he wanted. I don't know if it's a medrash, that by I think it was by the Akedah. Oh yeah, the aisle. The aisle was stuck. It was stuck in the thicket of, right? The horns were stuck, and that was going to be the replacement for Yitzchak Avinu, for his son Yitzchak. And according to a medrash, the aisle didn't just remain stuck in the thicket. It actually ran away, and Avram had to chase it. And where did it go? According to an opinion, I think it's also quoted in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, it went into a cave, none other than Ma'aras HaMachpelah. So already from way back when, Avram had this, he wanted that cave.
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
There's another medrash that says when Abraham went to check the cows to give the Malachim the tongues, one of the calves ran away, and he chased it
into the cave. Interesting. I wonder if both could have been, are they conflicting? Or maybe they're both, yeah. Maybe he went there a couple times. He's like, okay, I got to get back here another time.
Maybe the calf grew up to be the...
Ooh. You're saying maybe the calf grew up to be that aisle. Interesting. I like that. You did hear it here first. I like that. Interesting. Yeah. A little something. Wow.
The medrash even says that he met Adam and Chava, and they were unsettled because Chava was concerned about being buried along with the great people, Abraham and Sara, and all of them. And Abraham consoled her and told her that she could go lie down, and she was able to go back into the grave.
Really? Wow. The version I heard was that he smelled the reach of Gan Eden, which was mustama coming from Adam and Chava who were buried there. But that's another interesting perspective. Hey, Cheskel. No one's actually sitting here if you want to. No, it was a ghost. Okay, but I want to dwell on this Rashi. So Rashi says HaMachpelah, which means the double one. And Rashi says, Bayis va'ali al gabav. It was a house, it was a lower story and an upper story. You drive around these days and it's inspiring. Families, Baruch Hashem, they grow and then they have a certain, let's say a rancher, but then they get to a point where they just need to often expand. So they just completely annihilate the roof and you have construction companies come in, they add beams and wood. It's very inspiring to see the actions. There's 3 in my neighborhood and it's just very cool to see. And the highlight over here is Bayis va'aliyah al gabav, that it was a lower story and an upper story. And I mean, the Darshanim go to town on this, in terms of what this means. But I want to show you the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. Was he a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov? Maybe? Or somehow related. He's in the Hasidic world, Toldos Yaakov Yosef. He says this amazing thing, a Bayis va'aliyah. Okay, he says, Ki yesh beis olamos, there are 2 worlds. Olam hazeh v'olam haba. You can already start to guess, which one's what. Bayis v'aliyah gabav is not just, again, every Rashi has tremendous nuance of meaning, and it's always just more than the literal meaning. People, I forgot who said it. If you want to acquire your Shemaim, you just learn Chumash Rashi, and there's so much in just the Rashi. So Rashi says these simple words. He's explaining what the double cave was. Either the second opinion is it was kafula bezugos because you had Adam Chava and you had a husband and wife. But the other explanation, the first explanation is Bayis v'aliyah al gabav. Says the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, the Bayis represents Olam Hazeh and the Aliyah represents Olam Haba. That's Bayis v'aliyah al gabav. Keneged beis olamas elu yesh beis sugi anashim. He says, connected these 2 worlds, there's 2 types of people. Aleph nikra balabas, a balabayas. Someone's called a balabayas. Someone says, I'm a balabas, you're a working man, right? Ha'isik b'tikun abayis parnasas beiso, he goes out, he has a job, levad, We'll get back to that word. I underlined it for a reason. And Beis, you has the second type of person is the Baal HaAliyah. He's not a person who stays in the bias, but he goes in the attic. He goes in the upper story. He's the dweller of the upper realm. Osek b'Torah v'avodas Hashem, somebody who's involved in Osek in Torah and Avodas Hashem. And Yani Olam Haba Shnikra HaAliyah. So at least when I was in yeshiva, like people, like there was this term that you just hear all the time. Oh, there's like the yeshiva guys, and then there's balabatim, a balabayas. But the Tos Yaakov Yosef, I think he's saying something really key, and the word levad is very important. See, a person who just dwells in the lower story, he just goes out for the sake of levad, meaning it's the parnasa is for the sake of itself. He's on the rat race of the world, or whatever physical the food that he eats, whatever relationships he has, it's all levad. When the physicality becomes the ends, that's called a Baal HaBayis. You're limiting yourself. You're just going to stay on the ground floor. But there's a higher level than that. And that is, a person can still be working, but if it's not levad, and you have a higher purpose, you're working for the sake of, right? You're channeling it for something else, for the sake of taking care of your family, for seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world around us. Then that person, he climbs up the story from being just in the lower realm of Baal Abbas, to being a Baal HaAliyah. That was the Madrega, and the difference between the Vayakam Avram and the Ephron Yosef. Ephron was a bias man. He was a balabayas. He lived in the house, levad, alone. And that's why it says he was Yoshev, he was sitting, because you sit in a house, you're comfortable. Whatever level I'm at in my ruchnius, my spirituality, that's where I'm going to stay, because I'm comfortable. It's hard to do anything beyond that. It's hard to push myself anything more than that. That was Ephron. But Ephron is miloshin afar, dirt. When something is Yoshev, something just sits idly and nobody... shouldn't be pointing Svarim. Well, let's say you have Svarim that aren't touched for a while, it collects dust. My point is, things that sit unmoved, they collect dust. So it's not coincidence that Ephron is Afar, because he just sat there and collected dust, and Rashi admitted, Sheyetz miyad hedyot. He was a hedyot. It's interesting, you don't have there's a difference even in the social norms between living in a parent's basement versus a penthouse suite. We all understand that there's something luxurious and beautiful about a penthouse. The higher, and it has a spiritual dimension to it, because the lower it is that we go, even in our physical world, the more physicality there is. I forgot who says it. It's one of the Perushim on Chumash, that's why birds, they don't even need shechita. They're considered holier and higher because their main dwelling is in the avir, it's in the space. The lower you are to the ground, the more physicality, the more gashmi a person is. So then Ephron, Yoshev, bias, you're there, it's levad, it's living in the basement, right? You can't see things. Living in the basement, it can be depressing. You don't have windows per se, right? The higher you go, the more luxurious buildings are always higher. The most expensive unit is the penthouse suite. Why is that? Because the higher up we go, the more avir it is, the more spiritual it is.
So why is it that Tamil Chachamim and righteous people live in the upper versus all rich people live in the avir?
Right. Well,
People are more connected to Gashmis than the avir. Wouldn't you expect the opposite?
you're saying the way that they're living, very simple.
The Tamil Chachamim should be connected to the penthouse, and the celebrity should be connected to the upper.
Valid. Yeah. I mean, valid.
Maybe that's the point.
Yeah.
Is that Talmid Chachamim could be in the upper and it doesn't affect them. They don't need. They're getting their drive fulfilled by the pursuit of Torah and mitzvahs. But Risham, who are naturally pulled that way, they the only way that they feel they escape it is by the avir, like you're saying.
Right.
So
And
it's like an opposite
It's like a
effect.
coping mechanism.
Yeah.
The avir.
yeah, that interesting. Yeah. I'm also saying it as a mushal in terms of meaning it's true, the way that our Gedolim live, it comes across as the Afar, but it's not that. In terms of their psyche and where they're at, they're on a much higher madrega, right? They're living in a higher realm, even though physically it might not look it.
You're supposed to view yourself a little bit like upper, like we're nothing.
Yeah, even Avram, right, Afar of Afer, it's true to an extent, but if a person just stays only in that levad, then it has a negative effect, because our shivas do have to be higher, and it's interesting because Avram, yeah.
I was gonna say it's interesting that it's called yeshiva, and you're sort of like saying like Yoshev is not really a very complimentary sort of concept.
Valid.
Yeah.
But we call people who go through the yeshiva system as bnei aliyah. So, right, you have this contrasting thing.
Yeah.
I'm not. Which one?
Malach is Yosef, Malach doesn't move versus a person.
Correct. In that regard, in this regard, everything has a yin and a
it's
yang,
not-
like these black and white
it's not-
cookies,
it's
right?
not like a binary system. I mean, I think there's the way you're describing it. It's like, well, that's one possibility.
Correct.
If you view your life from a place of being osik in bias, then Yoshev means you're sitting around.
Correct.
If you look at it the other way, then Yoshev might mean something very different.
Yeah,
In
100%.
this context, that's what it means.
100%. Even Yaakov Avinu is called Yoshev Ohalim,
Yeah.
right? So even one of our greatest people, but at the end of the day, it's Yoshev, but it's Ohalim. It's multiple. It depends. Very good, right? It does depend where you're sitting, and ultimately, there's a point I wanted to mention that in the word Vayakim, when you rearrange it, also spells Kiyam. The way that Avram Avinu lived of rising up and getting up, that actually is the ultimate way to get to a level of Yishuv, what we call Yishuv Hadas, is by movement. Meaning where people think that to get to a level of tranquility is whatever, okay, I'm just going to be comfortable where I am, what I'm at. In Yiddishkeit, we say, no, it's not like that. The more you actually move and the more you embrace the uncomfortability, the more you grow and climb further and work on yourself and wake up for those early mornings and work on your midos, where you're working hard, you're sweating, that actually will instill Yishuv Hadas. So it's an irony, right? You're climbing, but you're going to experience that true tranquility, which the people who are Ephron Yoshev they're not actually experiencing that tranquility. They're not experiencing that calm. So it's like an ironic way to get there. Yeah.
That also happened with Yaakov. Every time he tried to settle Yoshev the land, trouble hit him.
Right. Vikesh Yaakov Leishev L'Shalva, the same word Leishev, and Hashem said, no, you're not, right? You gotta move. Sure, yeah, very good. Okay, with just because we're running out of time, we're not going to go inside, but you can look at the Ramchal Nefesh HaChaim, they both point out just like the things. You don't have to be there?
I don't have to be anywhere. I can sit. I can just sit.
The Kedushas Levi, if you see, it's very long. I'm telling you, this is a kedai. It's worth it to take home this paper just to read through this. I'll just tell you just briefly what he says, and this is going on what I was focusing on. That told us Yaakov Yosef that he said if a person is called the Baal bias when he's in the house, when he's working on his parnasa, levad, alone. But the Kedushas Levi answers a fundamental question that Lasid Levo, everybody's going to be asked when they get upstairs, were you Nesasav and Nesata B'Emunah? Were you honest in business? But another place the Gemara says that the first question is, did you learn Torah? I think we might have learned this together once, right? We did, yeah. So this is the Kedushas Levi in Lakutim, and he says, right, so which one is it? Is the first question going to be, were you honest in business? Or is the first question going to be, did you learn Torah? This is the question. There's a question that Tosfos actually asks in Shabbos, and he gives a novel answer. He says that, and I'll just read you one underlined line. V'nir levar d'shayla achas. It's one question. The question of were you honest in business and did you learn is one question. Because guess what? Anytime a person is out in the world and parnasas beso, he's doing tikkun habayis. If he's doing it with the right intention, then at those moments he actually says you're learning Torah. How so? Because when a person is out in the market and he's selling things and he sees an inappropriately dressed woman and he says, you know what, there's halacha, you're not allowed to look at a woman, right then at that moment, he's learning. And when a person is weighing out his measures, he's being the kind that what the Torah itself says that you need to have proper measure. And he gives it 3-4 examples, but he keeps saying, Nimsa loimed uz, at that moment you're learning halacha, at that moment you're learning a pasuk, whatever it is you're connecting to, if it's done the right way. So really the answer to the question of, were you honest in business and did you learn Torah? It's not a stira, because the Kedushas Levi is telling us it's really all one and the same thing, which is a fascinating perspective. You can read it inside, but it's quite powerful. Okay, I want to start wrapping up, but I want to show this. I want to show this to you. So the Gemara tells us. Well, they got me thinking about this. I'll tell you, because at the end of the Torah, it tells us that Yitzchak v'Yishmael. It says Yitzchak v'Yishmael. Even though Yishmael is older, it should say Yishmael v'Yitzchak. So Rashi tells us, Mikan, from here, we see that Yishmael did teshuvah. Right? Rashi says in this week's Parsha. What happened? From Mikan, from here, that it says Yitzchak before Yishmael, this was by the death of Avram, their father. So the fact that Yishmael, the older one, let Yitzchak go in front of him, from here we see he learned teshuvah. So it's just a funny thing. Like, yeah, it's very nice that he let his younger brother go first, but Mikan, from here we see that Yishmael was Chayei b'teshuvah. Like, why is that the place? The fact that he let him go first, his younger brother go first, how do we know from there that he did teshuvah?
Who's saying he let him go first because his name was written first? He went first where?
In escorting Avram, I guess the Aron, I think so.
Because his name was first and he actually went first.
Yeah, Rashi tells us, says Yitzchak v'Yishmael, Rashi points that out and says Mikan, from here he did teshuvah.
On a simple level, he's letting the tzaddik go first. So
that means now we know he changed his whole life around.
he's elevated himself to recognize
Okay.
that's what he should be doing.
What's the Gemara with, was it with the Acher? Where he's like, you're going to go to Olam Haba. He's like, well, who's going to walk first? He's like, I think someone else is going to walk first. Like, then I don't want it. So you see, walking first.
Oh, interesting. You see that
So
specifically,
it's
that
like,
in here.
you're being mighty, you're being mocked that that guy's bigger than you, so he gets to go in front.
But Yishmael also must have done some level of tshuva before that because he was with Eliezer and Abraham by the Akedah. So he had to earn that position, I would think.
Oh, as one of the two lads who came. Interesting. Right. But Rashi says Mikan, right? This was like right, but that is a good point. Kind of like what Ben was saying, I think the idea is that the ability to do teshuvah, to go from the bias to the aliyah, we'll see why I'm saying that, but to just go out of your comfort zone. Teshuvah means like you're just owning up to that there's someone else in my life. That someone else might be my greater version of myself that I could choose to be tomorrow. That's what teshuvah is, right? You're connecting to your deeper self. But making room for somebody else is like the greatest proof that you're letting go of your ego, which is the first requirement for teshuvah. You have to let go of like, this was my way of doing things. This was my Ephron Yoshev way of just being comfortable in the bias. And now I'm willing to take the flight upstairs up to the Aliyah. That shows that that shows teshuvah. So even from that simple gesture alone of him letting his older brother go first, the fact that he put his ego to the side, mikan. From there we see that he must have done teshuvah, because that's what the essence of what teshuvah is. It's putting your ego aside. And Arsa Machpelah, the Zohar points out, Ha-Machpelah, Hey-Machpelah, two Heys. When it comes to teshuvah, there's there's two types of teshuvah. There's teshuvah tata and teshuvah ilah. There's a lower type of teshuvah. There's the bias teshuvah, and then there's the ilah. There's the aliyah teshuvah. There's a teshuvah higher level. On the simple way of understanding that would be like the sur meirah is the lower level of teshuvah, and where you stop doing what those things that you shouldn't be doing. But then there's a higher level of you're actually becoming more davek HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're actually, right? It's more mindful. It's more asay tov focus. It's a higher level, and that is the illusion of ha-machpelah, hey-machpelah, the double hey. The hey is the one letter that represents teshuvah. The Gemara Menachos tells us, and this is number 7. The Gemara says, why is the Torah created with the? Why is the world Olam Hazeh created with a hay? Because a hay looks like an achsadra. It looks like a portico, like a porch, like a veranda, right? Shekol haroitza latzis yatzeh. It has a hole. Now I'll show you the picture. Right on the bottom, if you go down. There's an opening on the bottom. I was very excited about this. I made this today on Canva. You know Canva? Okay, so this is the letter hay, and I put fire on the bottom. You see, there's some dead people, like that. There's dead people. Basically, this picture represents our world. How so? So the world was created with the hay, and there's constantly an opening mitachas, underneath, and a person can always fall. There's always a Yetzer Hara trying to get a person to fall. I even I don't know if you see, there's a gray scale in there. Do you see that gray? That was representing like the Ephron, the Afar, the dirt, the dust, and then beneath that there's the there's like the fire. But so if a person's not working on themselves and they're just sitting idly, then they're just Ephron Yoshev, so then they just remain, I don't know if you could tell, but there's a little banana there. So the banana represents whatever you want it to represent, but like, where the person is like, it's like a very like, exactly, he's slipping on the banana. Well, you could replace that banana with whatever it is you want. And ultimately, if a person doesn't realize what teshuvah is that you now get to climb back up and go through the entrance. So all the commentaries ask is, well, if there's an opening on the bottom, why don't you just climb right back up? The Gemara itself asks this question: why do you need another entrance for teshuvah? And this is the last thing. And Ber Mayim Chaim tells us, he says, L'chayra, I underlined it, Lama lo mistaya milsa shel v'ves. Why don't you go back up the same hole you fell through? Why do you need to go over there? It's not enough to go back the way you came. A person has to go up. You have to go to the Aliyah. You have to leave the bias and go to the Aliyah. You have to be able to climb up another floor. To live with a desirable love, bayaris that's inflamed with Avas Hashem until you reach the top. So the little kotsos, the little stem of the hay represents like a yud. Olam haba was created with a yud, but there's a little bit of olam haba in olam hazeh. And our job, Avraham Avinu, was vayakam Avram. He was a person who chabbed, like, you're not supposed to stay on the bias, because when you do that Ephron Yoshev, you just fall. But if you're able to say vayakam Avram, you're able to say, okay, you know what, I could actually climb up, and that's my place of existence, to stand right on top of there and to live in that. This guy, he's like a little bit on the edge. That's why he's like, he has a string coming down from the top. He's already off that little like yud part. I think he's going to fall soon. I'm pretty sure he's like on the verge of total disaster. But this is where teshuvah is, right there. And I think that it's a powerful lesson. And I just want to end off with the gematria. So the gematria of Vayakam Avram and Vayakam Avram together is 808. So 808 is the gematria of Tachas. Tachas represents churban. Tachas represents destruction, right? Pasuk says, Tachas the word Tachas represents this. This is called, Rashi calls it shepasuach mitachtav. It represents this downfall of living just in this realm. So Vayakam Avram perhaps comes to contrast the Tachas of not living, of not embodying what this world is really supposed to be. And that, yeah, it's true, it's a bias, but people don't chop, there's an Aliyah al Gabav. There's an upper story that we're meant to climb. And I don't believe in any coincidences. So there's a story of Abraham Lincoln, he was a lawyer, I think it was before he was president. He went, and Avram, we're talking about Avram, who got up, upper stories. And the story of Abraham Lincoln? So he came home after like a long trip, like a couple of weeks, and he gets off his horse and buggy, and he looks to where he thought his house was, and his house isn't there. So he goes to knock on the neighbor. It was a structure he didn't recognize, exactly where his house was a couple weeks earlier. So he knocks on his neighbor's door, and he says, sorry, this is Abe, and like, I don't know where my house is, like, what's going on? And the neighbors told him, he said, no, when you were away, your wife built an upper story. So what Abraham didn't chop was that he was looking at his home, but before he left, it was just a single story. It was just a bias. He didn't realize that over the last couple of weeks, she made an addition to the home. She made an aliyah. She made an attic. She made an upper story. So I was thinking about that. Whether it's true or not, I saw it in a book that has story. What? Right, exactly. And this is a story, a bunch of stories of Abraham Lincoln. I just thought it was interesting because, like, in our lives, we,
reports that he descended from Jews.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Wife must have been Jewish.
Right, okay. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, I wouldn't be surprised. But anyways, the idea is like sometimes we're living in the bias and that's where we're comfortable. But as much as we can to try to Vayakam Avram, to realize no, this world actually has an upper story. It's called teshuvah. It's called living in line with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's called being aligned with His will. It's called not just doing parnasa levad for the sake in of itself, but for a higher purpose, for a higher being. And I think the more we do it, the more we get up like Avram Avinu, then the less dusty we'll feel, the less dusty we'll be. And ultimately, ironically enough, the more yishuv hadas we'll actually have in the pursuit, in this constant growth and process. And that was what I wanted to share. So, Shakaya.
Maybe that's the source for Kirub Tachtonim, is the gematria. It's like Tachas is actually where the action happens.
Oh, interesting, right?
Because that's the path of.
That's the path.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
The Tachtonim.
Okay, maybe all.
Build a dwelling place here.
Yeah, and we need it. Like that's where you need to build the foundation. Like you need the physical world, but like we can't just stay there. We need to, you know what I'm saying? We need to like connect it to a higher thing. Bias, vali al gaba.
Back into it.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything, any type of